Hi there, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing the Strike Back Videoathon Day 3 prompt, which is fantasy reads that you loved. And if you don't know what the Strike Back Videoathon is, check out my last video with the hashtag in the title. I will link it down below, and there I explain a little bit with some helpful links to understanding what we're doing. To do a quick summary, I'm basically going to be posting a video every day that I can for the next 30 days in relation to books, in relation to the tag that I will copy paste down below. So today is fantasy reads that you loved. I was trying to make an outline for this video and I realized that I actually don't read a whole lot of fantasy, and I feel like I read a lot of fantasy because I've watched a lot of adaptations of TV shows and movies of fantasy, like Game of Thrones and the Shannara Chronicles, etc. So that is definitely something I need to fix because I love fantasy. I love the concept of fairies and fae and all of those types of things, so I know that I would love it. I guess I haven't read that much. I will start off with the stuff that I have read, so duh, Harry Potter. Need I say more? No, I don't. Moving on. I would consider the Dark Tower series partially fantasy. It's mostly sci-fi related, I would say, and adult fiction, but I think there's an element of fantasy in there, so I'm gonna go ahead and include that. I think that if you love fantasy series, you will love the Dark Tower series. Even though it leans more toward science fiction, it reads more like fantasy than it does science fiction, so that's fun. Another series that I read, and I don't know, I have such a love-hate relationship with this series for so many reasons, and I have reviewed all of the books, so if you want, I will link those down below. I have some unpopular opinions about them, so if you love this series, go in with caution if you watch my reviews. A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. Yeah, I hated the first book. I was gifted the first and second book together as a early birthday present 2 years ago, and my friend who gifted them to me warned me, hey, you're gonna hate the first book. I mean, she loved the first book, but she just knew me really well, and she's like, you're gonna hate the first book, so just get through the first book. It's a short read, and then trust me, the second book is worth it. And she was definitely right. I loved that second book, A Court of Mist and Fury. I loved it. I ate it up. I couldn't put it down. I read it in the middle of Yosemite while I was camping, and because there was no one around me, I started shouting to the heavens, quite literally, about the unfairness or the crazy plot twists and things like that. I was so excited about that second book, and maybe it's because I built it up way too much in my head. I don't know, I admit that. Check out the review, but I was severely disappointed by the third book. So there's that. So I can't really tell if it's a favorite. I guess A Court of Mist and Fury is a favorite in and of itself. The series in general, not a favorite, so. And in relation to Sarah J. Maas, I did start reading The Crown of whatever, what is that called? Throne of Glass. So I did start reading the Throne of Glass series. I only read the first book. I actually quite enjoyed that first book. So I hear that it only gets better from there, so I'm optimistic about how much I would enjoy the series. So I do want to actually continue on with that at some point. Based off of how disappointing that third book in the ACOTAR series was, I guess I feel a little nervous and a little jaded over that. So I'm kind of like I'm not going to read Sarah J. Maas, but I probably will because I enjoyed that first book. But I read it like 8 months ago, so I might need to give that a reread, which is going to be challenging because I kind of gave that book away. I do have the second book, so I should start on that. But really, that's the only fantasy I can think off the top of my head that I have read recently. And by recently, I mean the last couple of years, not even just like this year or last few months. So I definitely need to add more fantasy reads into my repertoire. With that in mind, series that I would really like to read, I would like to read the Game of Thrones series, of course, because Game of Thrones, it's amazing. George R.R. Martin, if I have to say that. I'd love to read the Shannara Chronicles, of which I do have the first book. Back when the Shannara Chronicles was turned into a TV show, which is on Netflix if you want to watch it, I was like, man, I love this concept. The acting is cheesy AF, but that's kind of what fantasy is about. So I really want to read the writing because I feel like the writing would probably be a little less cheesy. And I really like the concept and the idea. I like the idea that magic and elves and dwarfs and things like that weren't a concept that we had many years ago, that we weren't descendants from these magical creatures and we lost our ability to have magic as time went on, that I like that Shannara Chronicles does this thing where it's like, it's a post-apocalyptic world technically. Because of nuclear war and radiation and things like that, we now have magic and elves and druids and things like that as a result of the mistakes our society has made today. So I really like that concept because that makes a lot more sense to me, is that a world of magic would be a post-apocalyptic world. So a series that came highly recommended from an old friend of mine is the Legend of Drizzt series by R.A. Salvatore. I actually have the first book because I went with this friend to a used bookstore to try to hunt down as many of the books in the series as we could, because it's a really long series, and I was actually gifted the first book, so I have the first book of that series as well, and that sounds really interesting. I don't 100% know what it's about. I just know that when my friend was reading it, that she would have to like tell me about it. She would do her best to tell me about it without super spoilers, but she like just had to talk about it, and the passion and the emotion that it brought out in her would just inspired me to want to read it. So I'm gonna do my best to keep up with this tag, so that means that I will definitely see you tomorrow. Bye.